Greetings, everyone! It is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, your Lord and Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. Are you ready for an interesting one today? Because we're diving into 4E once again. Yes. Today, I'm going to take you on a tour of what is the core of Dungeons & Dragons 4th Edition. If you are unaware of 4th Edition at all, if you've never really encountered it, I mean, you should know there's more than, the other 4 editions exist for D&D. That's not today. We're not talking history of the editions of D&D. We're diving into combat and looking at 4E and using its combat to get an idea and feel of how the game works. Because I've done a lot of other videos on 4E D&D, but combat and tactical combat is the core of 4E. As much as you can add in all the other things related to it, you can add in some role-playing, you can add in skill-based things, you can add in all the exploration. In the end, tactical combat is what 4E is made for more than anything. It's sort of like the bread and butter of it. They talk about early on, which I will get into, that you can do theater of the mind, it just doesn't work very well, because everything is numbers, and you with those numbers. It's a challenge. Now, again, if you're coming to me and trying to watch this, and you have no idea about role-playing games, then I'm like, well, why the hell should you? This is not for you. This is not a beginning thing. I have other older videos on 4E that are more beginning stuff that might help you out, and honestly, I'm going to be discussing this thing, excuse me, as if you would have a understanding of combat and rules from 5e or other TTRPGs. So that's where I'm coming at this, that you have some familiarity, for those of you who are joining me, on this pod. Okay, cool. We're at an equal pass here. We now know where we're coming from. I'm going to be comparing this pretty heavily to a lot of stuff with 5e and skip out a lot of the basics, because I think you're going to probably know that, or at least similar RPGs. And if you're way out there, 5e is a good simple system to start out with. This is a little bit more complex. Anyway, I can digress chatting about this and the entire setup for probably hours, because it's in my nature. But I really want to dive into combat. And I have kind of taken the entire combat section, which again is a pretty big section, with a little bit of other sections from other parts of the book, and refined them down. And that's where I'm going to get hit up with you folks here. So why don't we start at the very basics of combat when it comes to this here. So, alright, it's combat. We're going to fight some monsters, we're going to defeat some things, we've gotten in some trouble while exploring a dungeon. What do we do? Now, that's a big question that is very important to ask, because as much as I could say, oh, it's just, very similar to 5e combat. Well, yes and no. Certainly there are things that are very similar. Each player, each creature, each thing in the combat, it's a turn. Each of these turns is part of a round, where you go through all the combatants, and then go to the top, and it represents about 6 seconds. On each of those turns, they get their allotted ability to do things. There you go. Pretty simple basics of combat. It's the same for a lot of RPG systems. So, as long as you kind of got that, you're in the... Now, why do I say we can't do theater of the mind for this? Well, battle grids are really key, because positioning is important. There can be a lot of complexities related to these positionings and movements. Terrain plays an important part of 4E, and it can help with imagination for these complex scenarios. So that's why this is a system that really needs a balance. It can work with theater of the mind, but it is a very hefty challenge you're going on. And you definitely want to have a battle grid. 1-inch squares that represent 5-foot distance on each side. That's the standard kind of grid. You use it in 5e, you use it in Pathfinder, the 1-inch square boards, which uses a 5 foot. But when we talk about it in 4e, we will just talk about squares. It is to be assumed it's going to be a 5 foot square, so 5 foot on each side, but we'll talk about it in squares. Alright, now we're diving into combat now that we've got our basics out of the way. We got kind of where we're starting with. Let's talk about what you have to figure out. You have to figure out if anybody's surprised. I mean, that's a common thing for a lot of combat. See who notices who. You establish the positions on the battle grid where everybody starts out. Everybody rolls initiative. If you are not surprised and other people are surprised, there is a surprise round. Basically, if everybody's surprised or no one is surprised, then there's not a surprise round. But if there is some people surprised and some people not surprised, you do a surprise round where everybody in there can take one type of action. Talk about those types of actions a little later, but you just get one. And then you get into initiative order, everybody takes turns. There you go. Pretty simple basics. The next round begins, you keep going to the combats. Now let's start with where things differ for you to begin with. That is initiative. Initiative is a dexterity check. It's not just any dexterity check. Because certainly speaking, if you're rolling a d20, adding your dexterity modifier, that sounds a lot like 5e. And you can get some bonuses and penalties from different abilities that can add to that. Okay. Still very 5e, very other role-playing game. Where do we go different? Well, here's where level matters is an important idea for 40. The first time. And it won't be the last time. Because to your initiative, you add half your level. I'm level 10, I'm adding 5 to my initiative. I'm level 20, I'm adding 10 to my initiative. If I'm level 1, I add 0. Because it is rounded down. But if I'm level 2, I add 1 to my initiative. This means already a higher level thing that if I'm fighting it, will have bigger bonuses. A bonus to its initiative. It's going to probably be easier for it to act first. Certainly if it's got at least equivalent dexterity to mine. So you can see already level matters is important for it. Now, again, like any system where you build initiatives based on rolled numbers, you compare them, go from highest number to lowest number. If there's a tie, you see who has the bigger bonus. Basically, level, dex, miscellaneous stuff applied. And if there's a tie after that, you figure something. You can roll dice again, you can flip a coin, things like that to break the tie, basically. But there you go. Basics of initiative. We already see the differences. The surprise round. Did talk about that. But it is important to note that if you are surprised, you don't get any actions. You don't get immediate actions. You don't get free options. You can't get opportunity actions. And you grant combat advantage to anyone that would attack you if you are surprised with surprise rounds. If you're not surprised, you can take one of the 3 normal actions. A standard action, a move action, or a minor action. You can also take 3 actions during that time period because you're not surprised, but you can't spend action points. We'll talk about action points. In a second, we're going to talk about types of actions a little bit more in depth. But yes, one of those 3 types of actions, you choose one during the surprise round. I mean, that could be, certainly speaking, making a move to get into position, using a minor action to activate an ability, throwing out a standard action to use a ranged power. There's a lot of options during the surprise round, but certainly because you get that advantage, combat advantage, we'll talk about that condition later on, it's important. And it's basically based on perception checks, whether something's being stealthy, whether it's not being, it's that kind of thing. It's perceptions, insights, seeing about you being surprised. Alright, action types. We should talk about those, because I've now mentioned them. And like as I said, there are technically 3 main types of actions, and a 4th one that does exist. A standard action is the core. It's using power, charging, using most abilities. That's generally what it is. Move actions are movement-based. It's me walking from one space, me shifting a square over. Minor actions are small actions, which you get on your turn possibly too, which you can do things like, take an item out of a sheath or a pocket, open a door or treasure chest, picking up an item, activating certain powers that don't use a lot of, abilities. It's a minor ability. And you also get free actions. Now, the thing about all those other three, they're only on your turn. They're on your turn. But free actions, which take no time, it's, speaking, doing little things like dropping items and stuff like that, technically speaking, you can do free actions whenever, even other people in the combat's turns. But your DM can restrict free actions. You theoretically still can only do so much in your turn. So if you try to do too much, your DM may say, no. Now, there are two other types of actions we can talk about, and they're both triggered actions. Triggered means something happens, and the action is used as a result of that. It's triggered by it. One type is opportunity actions. Now, opportunity actions, opportunity attacks. They're a thing that appears in a lot of different fantasy-type RPGs in the D&D sphere. We all know them if you know 5e or similar games. Yeah, you take advantage. It's not the only thing that has an opportunity action. But keep that in mind. Opportunity attacks are one type of opportunity actions, but it is the similar kind of thing. Now, opportunity actions, you can take one on every opponent's turn. What does that mean? It means that for each of my combatants, just combatants, not even opponents, sorry, I misspoke there. For each of the combatants, not my own, I can take an opportunity action if it triggers it on that turn. I have one for my ally, my enemy, my enemy, my ally. Each of those turns can trigger an opportunity action. And I get one for each. Only one for each of those. But that means I can get a whole bunch of opportunity actions. That means if I'm getting 3 enemies and all 3 of them trigger an opportunity attack for me, I get to attack all 3 of them. This interrupts the action that triggers it. So that's important to note too. You're getting in the middle of it, and then resolving it and finding out what happens after you resolve your attack. So these are your opportunity actions. Now, opportunity attacks are the common, which are most commonly triggered by an enemy leaving a square adjacent to you. Now, immediate actions are the other type. You only get one immediate action per round. That means from when my turn ends to my turn begins again, I only get one in there. And I can't take it on my turn. It has to be on another combatant's turn, another character's turn. So anytime in there, though, immediate action. And it will have a specific trigger. The thing is, it also comes in 2 different types. While a opportunity action is an interrupt. It interrupts the action. An immediate action can be an interrupt. Can get in the middle of an action, could theoretically invalidate that action, just like an opportunity attack could. I'm interrupting that. I'm hitting you. I might drop you before you can attack me. I might not take damage. Oh, you're moving. I hit you. Or, you move up to me. I can move away as a immediate action. Hey, your attack doesn't work anymore. I've, caused your action to fail. Because it doesn't work anymore. That's interrupts. And whatever your immediate action is will define when it can be triggered. The type of trigger it is, and things like that. Whether it's an interrupt or the other type of reaction. Because reaction happens after. So you can see one happens during it, can cause an action to fail. The other happens right afterwards. This could still cause another action to fail. Because if someone moves up to you and use that movement as your trigger for an immediate action, a reaction, then that person afterwards would use a different action. You've kind of canceled it out a little bit. So it's not to say a reaction isn't something, but it is done in reaction to another action. So you have to wait for that to be done, for that creature to be done attacking, for that creature to finish up using its power, for that creature to finish its move. Then you can react, whether instead of in the middle of it. So, yes. You have to still keep in mind these are all immediate actions and opportunity actions are still interruptions in a way. Because, again, the reaction takes place after some form of action is done. It could still interrupt their turn overall, while a interrupt immediate action will interrupt their actual action, the reaction will interrupt their turn, and the opportunity actions also interrupt. Okay, now we have an idea on the action types. Again, a lot of this is pretty standard stuff that we kind of have an idea. There's some changes in the details, but it's pretty normal stuff. So let's talk about when it's your turn. That's an important thing, too, to talk about. It's your character's turn. What do you do? Well, first off, we have to talk about the actions you can take on your turn. Because we'll talk a little bit more in detail on the exact turn order, but you start out by choosing the actions you take. Because on a normal turn, you get one standard action, one move action, one minor action, and then the free actions within reason. Those are the three actions you get. Now, you can substitute some of these actions. A standard action can be substituted out for another move or another minor. So, I don't have to take that standard action. I can get rid of it for a smaller action. A move action can be substituted for a minor action. So, of these five, this gives us 5 different sets of things you can do on your turn. Option 1, a standard action, a move action, minor action. Option 2, a standard action and 2 minor actions, getting rid of your move. So option C, 2 moves and a minor, getting rid of your standard for a move. Option D, a move and 2 minors, dropping down that standard all the way to minor. Or option E, 3 minor actions. So you can always go down, but you can't go back up. I can't turn a move in for a standard. I'm only on a normal turn of myself, I'm going to get that one standard action. But I can get these possible other ones. I could take the 3 minors. That 3 minor actions might be activating 3 minor action powers that I feel like would be very important on my turn. So now we're looking at, and we know what actions we're taking on our turn. What happens when we start our turn? There is a start of a turn. No actions are taken when you start your turn, but there are things that happen when you start your turn. If you're suffering ongoing damage, which we'll talk about, it hits you now. If you're generating hit points, we'll talk about, it happens now. Any effects that occur at the start of your turn, with powers or things that you have, happen. Ongoing effects that say something happens at the beginning of your turn. And there are some effects and abilities that say they end at the start of your turn. Like, end at the start of your next turn. So you keep track of all those things. You're like, okay, my stuff here ends, this thing keeps going, get my ongoing damage, get my regenerations. Not really taking actions. Then, of course, you get your actions, which I mentioned, all the other different things. Your other combatants might take free actions, any kind of triggered immediate actions, opportunity actions to your actions, but I mentioned the ones you can take. It's also important to note you can take those actions, whether you're just doing the standard move and minor, or the combination of dropping them down, in any order. So you can substitute, you get those 3 basic, take them in any order. That is important to note. Now, taking your turn, you did all your things, boom, 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 it's the end of your turn. What are we getting out at the end of your turn? Well, first off, saving throws. If you saving throw against an effect, or something that is on you that a saving throw could end, you do it at the end of your turn. So if something negative is happening to you, or something that requires a saving throw is happening to you, end of your turn. You just take the rest of your turn, whether or not you lost that turn or lost actions because of what was going on, or not. There you go. Now you do have to check actions spent. What does that mean? Well, there are certain abilities that have a sustaining ability, meaning you have to take an action to sustain it. At the end of your turn, you have to say, well, Did I sustain it? It's kind of like a little bit of concentration that you have to take some kind of action for. Certain types of concentration require minor, some require move, some require standard. Did I do that proper action to maintain whatever ability I had? If you say no at the end of your turn, it ends. There are, again, effects that end at the end of your turn. Could be at the end of your next turn. And anything that ends at that proper turn ends there. And again, at the end of your turn, no actions. This is kind of the cleanup phase of everything. And then I talked about the actions you pick on other people's turns. We already mentioned that. We don't have to go. Okay. So, move on image or not. Let's talk about attacking and defending. Because there is some basic rules here that are very similar to any kind of one that you have before. But there is some differences. First off, we're talking about saves a lot differently. The saving throw, well, it's not the same thing that we would think about in 5e or even things in Pathfinder, and stuff like that. There's some Pathfinder 2nd edition, arguably from 4th edition, but if you're getting into 2nd edition, you're already there. You're going to be familiar with this. Effectively, what it is a save's different than your saving throw defenses, which is what you have now, which would be the saving throws we would have known from other systems. While 5e is one for each of the ability scores, if you do look back at something like 3e, you had a fortitude, reflex, and will, which you would roll. They are now defenses you have. So, hey, kind of talked about it in character creation. You have 4 defenses. Your armor, your fortitude, your reflex, your will. These are things that attacks are going to target against you. They're the same things you are going to target with your attacks. When you make an attack of any kind, just a basic attack, the power, the ability, the weapon defines what you use for. But you basically choose a type of attack, choose a target, make the attack roll, compare it to whatever defense you're trying to hit, do whatever damage. It's the basics of what there is. The devil, once again, is in the details. Melee is fairly standard for this thing. You have to be adjacent to something or within the reach of a melee weapon. Certain melee attacks would have reach. You have to be able to target the enemy. Ranged attacks, again, target. You have to be able to target, be able to see it, and not have stuff blocked away. It uses up projectiles that you have to track. It has a range. Ranged attacks used with an enemy adjacent to you provoke an attack of opportunity. Okay, that's the thing. There are 2 other types of attacks we can talk about beyond these 2 because those are the simple ones. Close attacks and area attacks. Close attacks, what are these? Usually there's some kind of attack that hits in an area close to you. It's usually multiple squares. It could be a blast of fire originating from you. It could just be a very big sword swing meant to hit multiple people. Both of those are ideas for a close attack. These are going to be traditionally powers, not necessarily weapons. When you got into the melee and range, those would be just basic weapons. So, yes, but when you get into this, there are 2 basic categories. Either you're using a weapon-based attack that hits multiple targets, or you're using some kind of energy that comes from it. Those are the 2 differentiations to a degree between this. They will have an area effect, which is either a blast or a burst. And it can affect multiple targets. We'll talk about what blast and burst are a little later, but yes, your area effect is either blast or burst. It has an origin square. A close burst has an origin square from something that is adjacent to you. Meaning that, okay, next to me is the origin square. This square right here. That could be diagonal from me. This 1 square around me, my 8 squares around me, is the origin of my blast. Your burst. The blast uses you as an origin. You burst. Okay, so you burst out in one direction, blast out all around you. And it has to be within the area to target. For this, you can target multiple creatures for a blast or burst, or a close attack. But you attack and roll attack rolls on each of them, roll your damage once. So you're doing the same damage to everything in the area. You roll the attack rolls on each of them. And if it should be something like a larger creature which has multiple squares, it's only going to hit once. A creature can only be targeted by your effect once. Keep that in mind. And if you're using a weapon like let's say you're doing a bow which does a burst or a blast with one of your powers, you still have to track the ammunition you're using because you're shooting one at every target then. Now then there's area attacks. Area attacks are made at a distance. They're not coming directly from you in some kind of way. That's fireball. If you ever know fireball, it's a fireball. You shoot out a fireball, it explodes in a fireball, that's a fireball, that's an area attack. There you go. There are other types of area attacks. With fireball is the basics. If I say fireball, you're going to understand it's fireball. Yes. You basically choose an origin square at some point in time, and it is the center of it. It has area of effect from that center. It doesn't need, it needs to be able to affect the target. It doesn't need to be able to see the target, because you don't have to see the target. It bursts. So keep that in mind. But you have to be able to basically see and target the square that you're... Well, you don't have to necessarily see. You have to be able to target the square that you're having the area attack come from. I can say that you don't have to technically see it. You don't have to have line of sight, but there's line of effect. For the fireball, I could throw a fireball into a dark room 10 feet in front of me. It's probably going to hit me too, 10 feet in front of me. But, or another similar spell that bursts out that, hey, the dark room's filled with attack. I don't see anything in it. I can't see it. The spell itself doesn't have to see anything. It just can't have stuff blocking it. And again, similar, one attack roll, or multiple attack rolls, one damage roll, and using projectiles. But if you use an area power while someone's adjacent to you, you treat it like a ranged attack, it provokes an attack of opportunity. If I fireball when an enemy's next to me, they attack of opportunity. They can attack of opportunity. If they haven't already. Remember, one for my turn, so if I've already provoked, I can't provoke another one. Then there are different types of areas. It's usually a burst, a wall, or some other kind of effect. We'll talk about that. Actually, we'll talk about that now. The areas of effect. So, I talked about how a blast comes from a single point. Traditionally, a blast comes from you. But the origin of a square is not affected by the blast, basically. Whether it's usually like the side of a square. So, like for me, I choose the side of the square in front of me, the blast comes out from there. That's my point of origin. And it goes out in a distance that is set. If it's a blast 3, it's a 3x3 square. If it's a blast 4, it's a 4x4 square. Blast 5, it's a 5x5 square. Blast 1, it's a single square. The origin square is the first square, but it still technically comes from... you are technically the origin square, one side of you, and it kind of goes out so that you're not affected by it. The burst, as I said, is a big explosion. It will tell you how far out it goes. With the 5x5 grid, I will tell you diagonals are 1. I'm just going to note that now. So it's very easy. It goes out a square. A burst of 3 will go out 3 squares in all directions. Like you measure them out diagonally, and that entire area is filled up. There you go. Pretty simple. You count out 3 in all directions. And the burst, again, it could originate from you if it's a close attack, or it could originate from a point of origin if it's something like a fireball, where I throw it out there, it explodes and bursts out. Walls are another type of thing that you can create with abilities. It has to at least have one side sharing with another part of the wall, and it can't share more than 2 sides with other parts of the wall. Meaning you can't circle the wall back on itself. It actually has to only have up to 2 other pieces touching it, just up to 2. But you can stack them on top of each other, which is an exception to that entire thing of extra ones. So you can go higher with your wall cubes that you're creating, but they at least have to kind of be in a row. They can make kind of angles, they can kind of go around stuff, But you can't be like back and forth like the 2 fingers. You'd have to kind of have like a hole in the middle, or circle around. They're kind of like a hole in the middle of a circle around here because then they're all each only touching 2 other pieces. You know, that's the maximum you can do. Target's pretty easy, but again, you have to usually be able to see and have effect of the target. Oh boy, we'll talk about targeting and seeing in a second here. Of course, things have range in squares. Again, I talked about how diagonals are measured just as a square. You count out squares to a target, and with its within range, boom, you're good to go. You know? And you start counting from an adjacent square. Even one that's diagonally adjacent, and keep counting. So, yep. And when you're counting for distance, you go to nearest square of a creature. That's what you're targeting. Well, that's what you're using, not for your targeting, but for figuring how far it is. And if it's something personal, it hits yourself. Okay, let's talk about line of sight and line of effect. These are big topics that come up in so many role-playing games that I want to try to hit these up before you and keep them simple. Line of sight is being able to see something. It's that simple. I can pick a corner of my square, and as long as I can draw a line from that corner to any part of a target's space, and there's nothing obscuring it, like objects in the way, like fog in the way, making it hard to see, I have line of sight. Pretty simple like that. Basically, I draw from my little like square here, corner to corner to any part of it. One of my corners. Meaning I could use a different corner if I think it would be better, like maybe like this corner is better than this corner for measuring it out. I'm trying to make a square with a hand, and it doesn't work too well. Oh, I have a D6. This corner might be better than this corner to target from. Hey, I got a square now. Wall all around it. Yeah. Things can obscure that, though. There could be things in the way. That would block. Stuff that obscures. Cloud. Darkness is a big one that keeps your vision from working there. You know, if you're partially able to see it, or just has concealment and you can kind of see it in there, that's enough to target. That's enough for line of sight. At very least. But if it's like behind something, if it's completely gone from your sight, boom, no, not line of sight. The fog would be so thick you couldn't see more than 5 feet in front of you. Line of effect, on the other hand, is a little different. You can target a creature or square if there's an unblocked path between you and it with line of effect. Every imaginary line you trace to a target passes through or touches a solid object. You don't have line of effect. So on the other hand, you have to use one corner. To test if you have line of effect, it's similar in a lot of ways because you have to have line of sight. You choose one of your corners and you draw lines to every part of the enemy. If one of them is open, it is line of effect. But fog, darkness, obscuring stuff doesn't block line of effect. So you have to keep that in mind. That's why the fireball into dark room or similar spell in dark room is an example. You need line of effect to target the square you're trying to target. In general, whether it's a creature or a spot to cast a spell into, specifically that spot. Like an origin square. You need line of effect from the origin square to the target. That's an important part for spells. That means if I personally have line of effect to someone, but when I throw that fireball over there, it doesn't have line of effect. That means it's not going to affect that person. I have line of effect, but I'm targeting other people. And it might not have line of effect to each other. Effectively, the origin, whether it's me shooting a bow, swinging a sword, and swinging a sword is a little hard to do this. This is better for, like, ranged attacks, more or less. You know, shooting that bow, I can't have stuff blocking. There are things that do block line of effect, but not line of sight. Wall of force, it's invisible, so you can see through it, but you can't shoot through it. Alright. Now, your attack roll. We understand targeting things, we understand the types of attacks we have. we now have to make our attack roll. This is an important one too, because you roll the attack powers base attack, add situational modifiers, and bonuses, penalties, and powers affecting you. Depending on what you are, depends on what it targets. A good example would be certain things, like a basic melee attack is strength versus AC, basic range attack is dex versus AC. Certain powers might be, something like strength versus fortitude, intelligence versus reflex, wisdom versus will, that kind of thing. Okay, so now we know what we're targeting. It depends on the power. What we're targeting. What's our attack bonus? Our base one. Well, it's half your level again. Wow, that half your level that I said was very important. Turns out it is again. Defense ability score, modifier of the power that or ability you're using. And then other factors are like weapons proficiency, if you're using a weapon you're proficient with. Abilities from your race/species, feat bonuses, enchantment bonuses from magic, item bonuses, power bonuses, untyped bonuses. There could be plenty of bonuses to this. There could also be penalties. But yes, you add together all the attack bonuses and penalties, then, and you basically on yourself calculate your base attack, traditionally. And if something comes in and starts affecting you, you keep track of that. Then the situational stuff will come up, where, oh, hey, maybe there's cover, maybe there's concealment, there's stuff that's kind of changing the battlefield that's not directly affecting me, but affects my ability to attack. There you go, and then other, powers. Of course, defense is very similar. AC, fort, reflex, will. AC is basically hitting you with physical things. It could be a magical effect that works like a weapon. And you have to be either quick or intelligent to dodge out of the way, because we'll talk about that. Fortitude is inherent toughness, mass, strength, resilience. Reflex is predicting and dodging attacks. Will is, of course, keep your mind from being overpowered. To all of your defensive scores, you figure them out by taking 10, adding 1/2 of your level. Again, level seems to come up a lot, especially half your level. Wow, it turns out that level matters pretty heavily before you. That happens a lot in Pathfinder 2, 2e Pathfinder. But it's very important. You get armor bonuses. If you have an armor or shield, you get those both bonuses to your AC. And, then you add your dex or intelligence to armor class, other than armor and shield. Fortitude uses strength or con, whichever's higher. Reflex uses int or dex, whichever's higher. But if you're using a shield, you also can add that to reflex. And then will uses wisdom or charisma, whichever higher, for ability scores. And that's onto your 10 plus half your level. And then you get, racial, feat bonuses, enchantment bonuses, item bonus, power bonus, untyped bonus, all the other types of bonuses that exist out there go on to your defensive scores. So, now we have to talk about what happens when your attack happens. The result. You can hit, you can miss. That's pretty obvious, but there are some details that we have to talk about. Of course, hitting means meeting the target's AC, reflex, fortitude, will, whatever target number. You either have to hit that target number or go high. If you roll a natural 20, it is an automatic hit. It might be a critical hit, but it might not be. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about what critical hits do, because it's different than a lot of other editions. So we'll get into details, but a 20 is an automatic hit, maybe a critical. A miss, of course, you get lower than the defense score, but a natural 1 is an automatic miss, too. So if I roll 1, I missed, even my attack bonus would have been high enough to hit their AC, for the situation. Of course, damage is prescribed by whatever you're using. And it comes in a couple of different types. So most of the time it will tell you dice to roll, add an ability score modifiers, usually the one that you use to attack with it. Like if I'm using let's say a intelligence-based attack, I'd add intelligence to my damage. Traditionally, it's the same modifier to this in most situations. It'll tell me roll 3d6 damage. It'll also tell you W damage. Or 2W. Or 2W plus strength. What does this mean? Weapon. whatever weapon I'm using, whether melee or ranged, which it will define in the power with which one you can use, that determines that for damage. And similar to all the other things, there's a lot of miscellaneous bonuses that can add to damage too. We're not talking about them. But if my weapon does a d8, then that W would be 1d8. That 2W would be 2d8. That 2W plus strength would be 2d8 plus my strength modifier. Now, damage type also matters too, because there's lots of different damage types, and a attack will define the damage type. Whether it's a specific weapon or an ability, it'll say that type of damage. It'll say, oh, I'm doing psychic damage with this. I'm doing just, slashing damage with this. I'm doing necrotic damage with this. I'm doing fire damage from my fireball. It defines it from that. There are resistances and vulnerabilities. What do these do? These are similar, closer to older editions of D&D, not the current one. If you have a resistance, it says, I have a resistance of 5, let's say, to fire. It means I take 5 less damage from a fire attack. If I have resistance 10 to fire, I think traditionally they're going to come in multiples of 5s, but it'll tell you, I resist this much damage, I take that much less damage from that type of attack, from that type of damage. Similar vulnerable is, if I have vulnerable fire 5, means I take 5 extra damage from a source of fire. That's it. It means that, I get hit by fire, I take an extra 5 damage. It could do 1 fire damage to me, and it makes do 6 damage, because I'm vulnerable. Ouch. Now, right, agree. We still have a lot to go over here. Let's talk about conditions. Conditions are negative things that hinder you or have effects on you, traditionally hindrance, that most of these, you do things to end at the end of your turn with a saving throw. We'll talk about saving throws a little bit more. I'm not going to get into the depths of all the conditions, but I'm basically going to give some summary of most of them. You're blinded, you can't see, you grant combat advantage to anybody that attacks you. Dazed, you grant combat advantage. You can take one type of action, only one standard move or minor action. Can't use immediate actions or opportunity actions. Deafened, you can't hear anything, get penalties to perception. Dominated, you're dazed, hey, over there. And the dominated creature can choose your actions. Dying, you're unconscious at 0 negative hit points, having death saves. Helpless, you grant combat advantage. You can be the target of coup de grace. You're usually also unconscious for this, but they're, not necessarily. You can be helpless without being unconscious. Immobilized, you can't move. You can be teleport, and you can be forced to move. Marked, I talked about marked when I talked about my classes. You get a -2 attack penalty to attack anybody other than the target that marked you. Petrified, you're turned to stone. That's pretty other. Prone, you're on the ground. You grant combat advantage to anybody making melee attacks against you. And +2 to all your bonuses against range attacks that are from non-adjacent enemies. Meaning I could come up to you and range attack you, but I'd also provoke an attack of opportunity. You're lying on the ground. You take -2 penalty to your own attack rolls, and you can drop prone as a minor action. Restrained. You grant combat advantage. You're also immobilized. You can't be forced to be pushed to move by push, pull, or slide. So teleport. Take -2 to your attack rolls. Slowed. Your speed becomes 2, and it applies to all types of your movements, but not to teleportation or the forced movements. Push, pull, slide. And you can't increase your speed by any means when you are slow. Stunned. Can't you grant combat advantage? Can't take actions or flank. Surprised. Grant combat advantage. Can't take actions other than free actions. Can't flank. Unconscious. You're helpless. Take -5 to all your defenses. Can't take actions. Fall prone if possible. And can't flank them. And weakened. Your attacks do half damage. And ongoing damage you deal is not effective. There's also insubstantial, which can be things like ghosts and stuff. Where if you're insubstantial, you take half damage from anything, including ongoing damage. So it's just, if you're insubstantial, half damage from everything. Nice. Ongoing damage. We should mention this. What it is. If you damage, you take at the start of your turn. A power or effect that hits you could say you get ongoing damage of an amount. You could say you're taking 5 fire damage on the start of your turn. On the start of your turn, you take 5 fire damage. At the end of your turn, you save against that. And we'll talk about saving throws in a second, but basically you make your save and see if you end it. If they're different types of damage, all of them apply. If they are the same type of damage, only the highest damage applies. The rest of them don't matter. They aren't there. So basically, like if I get hit by multiple fire sources that have ongoing damage, only the most damaging one is the one that applies. The rest of them are just subseded by it. Critical hits. Hey, that 20 you roll. Well, natural 20 is a hit. It's a critical hit if your total attack is high enough to hit the target's defense. So, this is really good for really much more powerful than you creatures. You can still hit them with a 20. You just may not critical. There are some class features and powers that allow you to score a critical hit on a number other than a 20, but the 20 is only the automatic hit stick. It could say a 19 could be considered a critical hit, still hit with it, but it's not an automatic hit. For critical hits, you do maximum damage. Whatever you roll for it, that's your maximum. That's what a critical hit does. Now, there is possibility for extra damage for critical hits. Normally, things with like certain weapons or implements will have basically, or special weapons will say like they do extra damage. This extra damage for particular criticals, you do roll. So it will define that and be like, oh, you do maximum damage from your normal attack, but this, because it's a high critical weapon, you also roll a d8 extra. Ooh. We'll talk about a little bit more, also forced movement with push, pull, and slide, because that's also a thing. And that could be a result of an attack. Durations are important to note, too. We should talk about those just a little bit here. There is durations that have either conditional, sustained, or overlap. So conditional means that's start of your next turn, until the end of your next turn, until the end of the encounter, until the save ends it. Those are all conditional. It tells you a time when a condition, a duration of something ends. You know, oh, it ends when a save ends it. Oh, it ends when the end of the encounter. It goes to the entire encounter. Important note for the encounter is 5 minutes is the maximum for anything like that. And that's the same for sustain stuff. Because sustain means you can sustain it as a type of action. Standard, move, or minor. It will tell you in whatever effect you're having has that duration. You have to keep doing that. Again, most times a power will define how long you can sustain it and what happens when you sustain it. If you let it go to the end, and at the end of your turn you haven't sustained it, it ends. If multiple powers have the same effect but different times, the effect of the most time remains applies. So basically, if two things are slowing me, whatever one will last the longest is the one that's implied. Like if one is until the end of my next turn and one is until save ends, save end one's technically is a little long. And also, again, sustained things will last 5 minutes, basically. Unless the description of the power says otherwise. So keep that in mind. There could be a power that allows you to sustain something more than 5 minutes. It will specifically mention in that. Otherwise, just assume, 5 minutes for, end of encounter, sustained things, or conditions, or durations. And finally, before we move on to the next section, saving throws. This is another part of an attack, because it can result from the conditions you're getting into saving throws. Well, it's a d20 roll. It's simple as that. It's unmodified by level or ability score. It is just a straight up, I roll a d20 and see what I get. What does that mean? Well, it's at the end of your turn, and to each thing you can make a saving throw, you roll it for each. So if I'm getting 3 things I have to save against, I would roll it 3 times. If I roll a 10 or lower, or no, a little lower than a 10, I failed the saving throw. Whatever effect it is continues. If I roll a 10 or higher, the effect ends. So you have a 55% chance of ending something with a saving throw, but it's the end of your turn. You can choose the order of your saves. That's an important thing, because there could be something going on you that could provide penalties to saving throws. So you want to try to end that first and have a better chance, especially because, normally it's just an unmodified d20, but there are powers, feats, things that some kind of racial abilities that do have bonuses to saving throws, so keep that in mind. You could get stuff that gives you bonuses to these saving throws. So, order could still matter. You roll a d20, just figure it out. And you can have more. You can have so many things on you. All right, let's talk combat modifiers. And I'm not going to go super in depth about this. There are 3 things I want to talk about mainly. Combat advantage, cover, concealment. Big ones. Combat advantage. I mentioned it a few times. What the hell is this? It's me in a position where I'm compromised. I'm granting combat advantage to everybody else. And the thing is, it is an important thing, combat advantage is between 2 targets. Meaning, just because I'm granting combat advantage to that guy over there doesn't mean I'm granting combat advantage to him over there. Or her. It's situational to each of us. It could be something that I grant combat advantage to all my targets. It could be the same for one of my targets. But anybody that has combat advantage against another, whether it's something having combat advantage against me, or me having combat advantage against another target, I get +2 attack bonus, hit them. But I must be able to see them. I have to be able to see the target to grant combat advantage. So just because I have line of effect doesn't mean I get that combat advantage. I also have to have line of sight. That's where that discussion comes back. There are a lot of things that, grant combat advantage in various directions, so keep that in mind too. And there are powers that take advantage of combat advantage. So, hey, I get bonuses. Once per encounter, you are able to make a attempt to gain combat advantage by making a bluff check. So with a bluff skill, that's basically an attempt to trick someone and gain combat advantage. It is a possibility that you can do once in a encounter. And again, it's relevant. Cover. Cover is having something in the way blocking. It comes in 2 main forms. Basic cover, which could be a small pillar, small tree, half wall, a piece of furniture. It's kind of blocking the way for your attacks against the target. Like, I have something in the way of you. It's a -2 penalty attack rolls. There's also superior cover, which means it's mostly blocking. It's heavy protection. It's like through a window, through portcullis, grate, an arrow slit, -5 to hit the target that's through there. They might not have the same cover because they're using that cover, but you targeting them is very difficult. When you make area or close attacks, the target could still have cover if it's from the origin square. Not for you in this case. Not between you and the target, so keep that in mind for area and close attacks. Reach does not matter. Just because I have reach, that could maybe I could reach around a tree. That doesn't matter. It's still got something between me and it. And not allies, but enemies can grant each other cover. If I'm fighting a couple of kobolds, one kobold is standing in front of the other. That one in the front is granting normal cover to the one behind it. It's blocking my way. I have to shoot around and through them. And you choose a corner you can occupy, and you trace lines from that corner to every corner of the square, one of the squares of the target. That's why big creatures are a little easier to get around cover, because they have multiple squares. But to one of those squares, you trace from your corner, right here, to every of their corners. If one or two of those lines are blocked by an obstacle, it has cover. If 3 or 4 lines are blocked, but you have line of effect, it has superior cover. That's what I mean. It could have, from that corner, all the lines are going through something, but you still could technically target it. You have superior cover. There you go. That's how you did it. Concealment is stuff that blocks your things. It makes you obscured, whether it's light, heavy, or total. Total being darkness, heavy being like heavy fog, heavy smoke, heavy foliage, light being a little bit of dim light, a little bit of fog, a little bit of smoke, some snow, rain. That can be all those kind of types of cover. If you have light obscured, or you're heavily obscured but it's adjacent to you, it's got concealment, -2 penalty tactics. If it's invisible, I'll talk about that in a second, it's totally obscured or heavily obscured and not adjacent to you, it's total concealment, -5 penalty tactics. And this is to melee and range attacks only. So keep that in mind. And then invisible is you can't be seen, you have combat advantage against any enemy that can't see you, you don't provoke attacks of opportunity. You can't be seen. That is. Alright. Let's talk about positioning, now that we have all the modifiers done. Well, I guess the first thing we should talk about is size, because that's important too. I think I'm not going to talk about necessarily tiny creatures. Small creatures are treated the same as medium creatures. Don't worry about that. Tiny, multiple things can fit in the same square. This includes swarms, which a lot of things will fit into a square, and tiny things can occupy other squares. Keep that in mind. Anything larger than that takes up multiple squares. Like a large creature takes up a 2x2 area. A huge creature takes up 3x3. A gargantuan creature takes up 4x4 or larger. So pretty big areas. And then they have multiple squares to determine stuff a lot more. They got some advantages, but normally they smush you there. So keep those in mind. Speed is a thing that you have, which again, since 1 inch represents a 5-foot square, a basic character normally has a speed of 6. Most characters do, which means you can move 6 squares or 30 feet on the battle grid as a move action. So things when it defines speed or distances will be squared by squares. Okay. And armor can apply penalties to speed, as well as bonuses from other miscellaneous stats. And, tactical movement. Keep in mind, as I said, diagonals. When you make a diagonal, a creature, no matter friend or enemy, does not block diagonal movement, but objects, especially things that are filling that square, will block it, and you have to walk around it. So, if this is a corner of a wall, you gotta walk around it. You can't clip the wall. Allies are not, can be a space that's occupied. Enemies can be a space that's occupied. Normally you can't move through an enemy space, but you can move through an ally space. If an enemy or ally is helpless or unconscious, then you can definitely move into their space. If you end movement, if it's an ally space, if they're prone, you can do that. If it's an enemy, they have to be helpless. Doesn't necessarily mean unconscious, it can be just helpless too. Hey, look at that. I'll call back to that one there. Tiny creatures, of course, can move into those spaces. And you can also then stand up if someone's in your space. We'll talk about it. So, we've kind of talked about how there is things in the terrain that can block sight, give you cover, give you concealment. There's also difficult terrain, more difficult to move into. Each square of difficult terrain costs a little bit more to move into. 1 extra square of movement. If you can't enter a square because you don't have enough movement, then you end your turn movement. Basically like, I've moved 3 spaces, I have 3 more movement, I can move 1 more space into this difficult terrain. The second move, I only have 1 square of movement left, but it costs me 2 to move forward. Well, I can't move forward anymore. Flying ignores difficult terrain, and some things have the ability to ignore difficult terrain, and specifically, I'm not going to go into details, but large, huge, and gargantuan creatures have slightly different rules for it, just because they can get screwed over by difficult terrain. There's also a possibility of obstacles, which they can be filling a square, which can provide cover. Also can make it difficult to move through that square, or obstacles between squares, like a low wall, where it could be like entering difficult terrain, even though I'm moving from one space to another, stepping over a wall, just means I'm moving, and it takes me 2 spaces to move. If you do 2 movements on your turn, it's a double move. It's you taking your standard action, doing a move. A double move counts as 1 speed. So that's an important thing. It's the same move action, too. You do not take 2 move actions. You take 2 move actions combined. So, that's an important one. Your first move So yeah. You take the same move action twice in a row on the same turn with a double move. Effectively, you don't have to double move, but you can double move, and it's got special rules. I guess that's the way I should explain it. When you take your two move actions, if you take them twice in a row and then the same one, it's a double move. You take them one after another, it counts as one speed for your increased speed, which can help with difficult terrain, basically. That's an entire thing, basically. The entire point of the double move is it helps with difficult terrain. If you have a speed of 5, and you're moving through difficult terrain, normally you move 2 spaces, I'd lose a movement because of the difficult terrain. Oh, take another move. Again, you only move 4 squares. Hey, because of the nature of the double move, you can move 5 squares. It's really for difficult terrain more than anything. And also, like, your first move can technically end in an ally's square because you're not technically stopping. There you go. There's rules for fall damage. It's 1d10 for each 10 feet. If you fall more than 50 feet for simplified rules, you take 25 damage for 50 feet, and 1d10 for extra 10 feet. You fall prone. You can jump down with acrobatics. You can catch yourself. Especially if you're forced movement, you can save. Catch yourself. So I can force someone off of a wall. You can catch themselves. And it's a basic save where you either fall or you don't. And larger creatures, you have to get all their squares off for them to fall. Flanking. We can mention flanking. Flanking is important as it grants combat advantage. It is opposite sides. What I mean by that is, if I'm looking at my square here, D6, it has to be on the complete opposite, and it has to go from corner to corner, side to side. I can't go from corner to side to determine flanking. It has to be corner to corner, side to side. But drawing that line across, if you do so, larger creatures easier to flank. You grant that creature, you're getting combat advantage against it, and you have to be able to attack to do that. So keep that in mind. If you can attack, you don't grant combat advantage. You don't grant flanking. Okay, the forced movements, which are push, pull, and slide. Pull, bring a creature closer to you. Push it away. Slide, move it in any direction you want to. Slide is the superior one of these. Just keep that in mind. I've already got an hour here, and we're not going through it. This is a large section. We're talking about a lot. We're pretty close through here. The force movement has to have line of effect. What do I mean by that? You have to have line of effect to the thing that you're basically using the force movement on. The force movement have a distance in squares that'll define. Of course, if you're pushing, push away, pull towards you, slide, go in directions. They will also specify directions. Force movement does not provoke attack of opportunity. It ignores difficult terrain. It's not a move. Also, the force movement itself can't have an obstacle, or force a target to squeeze. So, yeah. It can't push into something that way. Push off a ledge, that's not an obstacle, it's just a ledge. Again, the catching yourself, and things that swap places, it causes the target to slide into your square, and then you shift out of that square. Teleportation is another movement. You have to have line of sight, but not line of effect to teleport. It doesn't provide a box of opportunity. It has to be a destination you're not squeezing into. It's instantaneous, and you can even do all mobilized. And there's another type of movement called phasing, which you can ignore difficult terrain and move through obstacles and other creatures, but you must end in a movement in unoccupied space. Alright. We're getting there. We're almost done for today. It's been a long time. There's a lot of stuff to go over here. I understand we're getting tired. Feeling the burn. Let's talk about actions in combat just a little. I'm not going to get into super depth with everything, but there are some sections I want to talk about. First off, action points. Action points is an important part of this because you have an action point. Well, okay. You start with an action point. Some monsters do also, but usually monsters don't. You gain 1 action point when you reach a milestone. What's a milestone? Well, milestone means I take 2 combats without resting. And I mean any kind of resting. That's what a milestone is. And I get another action point with that. Well, 2 encounters without stopping for an extended rest, I should say. Sorry. If I take 2 combats without stopping for an extended rest, I can take a shorter rest, then I get an action from the milestone. I get that 1 I start with. When you use an extended rest, you lose any unspent action points, and then when you get up, you start with 1 again. So per extended rest, you normally get 1. But if you milestone, you get some more. What do action points do for me? Well, during your turn, you can spend 1 to, first off, get an extra action. Oh, well, first off, you can only spend an action point during your turn. Never during a surprise round. You gain an extra action. Could be standard, could be move, could be minor. It is also important to note, regardless of how many action points you've saved up, you only get 1 per encounter. And you must spend a short rest before you can spend another. Monsters are a little different. They can, if they have action points, they can oftentimes spend more than 1 per encounter. They've got certain rules. They're not you. But you, if you're 1 action point, 1 per encounter, and if you've got a milestone to get extras, you have a short rest before you can use another one. You can earn another one. But it's an extra attack. Alright, some basic actions you can take. Aid another, grants bonuses to skill checks or attack rolls to another. Basic attacks. This is something you can just do. If you have a weapon, you can attack with it. It's a basic attack that everybody has. Basic melee, basic range. You can bull rush, which is a push of a target, which is a strength-based attack. You can charge, where you have to move, where it's a standard action. You move your speed as part of the charge to make a basic melee attack, or bull rush at the end, which is a +1 bonus to, and you have to at least move 2 squares, charge up to someone. And once you provoke attacks of opportunity for that, you can't take any more actions. Coup de grace, which if a target is helpless, you automatically critically. And if you do damage equal to or greater than its bloody value, it dies. Move actions, crawl, move half your speed on the ground, that provokes attack of opportunity. You can, of course, delay. It's as simple as that. You don't take your turn, but keep in mind, when you delay, you do your start of turn, so anything that happens at the start of turn, but you don't do your end of turn until you take your turn. So, I can delay, I get my start of turn, I come back in initiative order when I choose to act. You know, if I wait all back to my next initiative, I basically lost my turn, and we just get back to my new turn, which means I might have 2 start of the turns in a round, and I won't end my turn to end effects. Because you don't have a normal end of turn, is what happens when you delay. When you delay, you do end beneficial effects. You end sustained effects. That's the only thing that happens when I choose that delay. So I kind of have an end of turn, but it's only halfway, and it's only 2 basically good things. And my sustained stuff. The harmful stuff that's happening to, or saving throws, don't end until I actually take my turn from the delay. You can escape if you're grabbed. Of course, you can grab. I won't go into those rules. There's the opportunity attack, which is a basic attack. Basic melee attack, I should say. Moving provokes it. Ranged area attacks provoke it. Once per combatant's turn, you have to be able to attack. It interrupts the actions, and you can threaten within your reach. You can ready an action, which you choose a trigger, and it could be an immediate reaction. You can interrupt an enemy, but you have to kind of figure out how to make it interrupt an enemy. Like, you wouldn't ready an action in response to an attack. You'd ready it to someone moving up to you. They've made their move. You go in reaction to that, so it moved up to you. Oh, I move away. Or I shift away. Oh, man. Can't do that attack you were going to do? Shoot. I've interrupted you by interrupting your turn at a strategic point. And it does change your initiative, just like both delaying and readying. You can run. You increase your speed by 2. Take -5 penalty to attack rolls when you're running. You grant combat advantage, and you provoke attack opportunities. Second wind. Now this I do want to talk about a little bit as an action, because it is a unique thing here. It's a type of healing. You can spend one of your healing surges. Talk about that in a second. But you spend your healing surge to heal yourself And once you spend a second wind, you get +2 bonuses to all your defenses until the start of your next turn. And it's once per encounter, you can second wind. Basically, if you're in bad shape, you can kind of like pat yourself on the shoulder, get some healing, get in a defensive position again, get yourself back in the battle. Something you can do if you need to. You can shift. That's a 5-foot step. You basically move 1 square, provokes no attack of opportunity. Traditionally, it's just 1 square. Some things will allow you to shift more than 1 square, then you can avoid difficult terrain. Otherwise, you can't shift in difficult terrain, and normally you can't shift within special movement, unless specifically they give you the ability. Squeezing, it's, makes it harder for you to attack, grant combat advantage. It's usually for bigger creatures, but a medium creature can even squeeze. Standing up, you get back up. It's a move action. It does not provoke an attack of opportunity, so keep that in mind. You either move up if you're in an occupied space, or if it's an occupied space, you shift 1 square. Walking is movement. You walk and you provoke attacks of opportunity using power. Hey, I use a power that costs a action for the power. Or I can take a total defense. It's a standard action. I get +2 to all my defenses. It's like total defense is basically second wind, except I don't get the healing. Alright. Now before we get to our last section here, which is going to be health and dying, we want to talk about resting a little bit. Because I do want to go into a detail of what you get for the 2 types of rests and what they mean. Okay, there's a short rest and an extended rest. The short rest you're traditionally going to take after combat. Unlike 5e, a short rest in 4e is 5 minutes. You take as many short rests as you want in a day. About 5 minutes. Catching your breath, getting ready. You can't take a strenuous any activity during that time. You could sit in place, ride a wagon, other vehicles, stand guard, anything that doesn't require a lot of exertion. After that, you renew encounter powers. You can spend healing surges during that time. We'll talk about healing in a second. That's what you can do. Remember, second wind can send a healing surge. Oh, short rest I can also spend it during it. There are powers you can use during the rest. And you can be interrupted. Like, if I start a short rest after encounter, I could have not known that, like, these guys' allies that I just beat up are, 2 minutes away and are about to arrive. You would have to rest again. An extended rest is 6 hours. You can only get another extended rest after you have waited 12 hours. So, basically once per day. It has to be 12 hours later before you can take another extended rest, at minimum. You can't do any strenuous activities, just like before. At the end of it, you regain hit points that you've lost, and healing surges. You heal all the way back up. At the end of that, you regain any encounter powers and daily powers. You reset your action points down to 1, and again, it could be interrupted. Hey, those are the basics of resting. Now, why did I want to talk about this? Because we have to talk about healing and death, which is an important part about combat. To finish up today. Hey, we're almost done. So, when we talk about hit points, you have a maximum hit point value. You also have a bloody value. I mentioned that. What is my bloody value? Half your hit points rounded down. So if I have 20 hit points, my bloody value is 10. If I have 25, it's 12. There are abilities, powers, and things of both you and your allies, and enemies that work better against targets that are bloody. And once you drop to 0 or lower, you're dying. Okay. Healing surges. Your class defines your healing surges, but your constitution also defines your healing surges. What are a healing surge? It's when you use a second wind during an encounter, or during a short rest when you use one, you usually use the surge to heal yourself, a healing value. Your class and constitution modifier has determined how many of these you get a day. The value of your healing surge is 1/4 of your maximum hit points, rounded down. That's your value. So, very easily, if I have 20 hit points, my bloody value is 10, my healing surge value is 5. The second one will heal me 5. Using any surges during a short rest will heal me 5. Then again, when we also look at, hey, good old 25 health. Bloody value 12, healing surge value 6. Again, we can get that kind of double round down, unfortunately, sometimes. It can happen. Let's say I've got 27 hit points. Now, if I get my bloody value at half point, it goes down to 13. And then 6. It's rounded down. It's a quarter rounded down. Always. So, again, you could also divide it by 4, you're 27, it's still going to be 6. As a general rule, NPCs and monsters have a number of healing surge equal to their tier. Just if they get a chance to heal, that's what it is. There are other ways to heal in combat other than Second Wind, using the heal skill, allies that have healing powers. Some of them have you spend healing surges, some of them don't. It depends on the power. Some of them just give you gain hit points as if you had spent a healing surge without actually healing. Regeneration is a type of healing that you only heal with regeneration if you are above 0 hit points. As soon as you hit 0, you no longer regenerate. So keep that in mind, is that it's a specific number that you regain those hit points at the start of your turn, only if you have hit points. You can only go up to your maximum hit points with that one, and more than one source of regeneration is not cumulative, whatever it is the largest number. There's also temporary hit points, which are a buffer. They're not real hit points. They're damage you take first. They don't count towards your maximum, so you can have any number. They are, of course, as I said, a buffer, so they're lost first. You don't add temporary hit points together. For multiple sources, whichever's highest you use. And they last until you rest. Any kind of rest. Dying. You finish up there. You're dying when you drop to 0 or fewer. You make death saves. If you are basically, at the end of your turn, you make a death save. If you get 10, lower than 10, you slip closer to death. If you roll that 3 times before you take a rest, you die. Let me say that again. 3 times, failing a death save before you take a rest, you die. I mean that, including short rests and extended rests. That means, if I've been dropped down, and I get back up, those death saves are still affecting me. They're not gone. Now, the other thing about this is, if I roll a 19 to 20, there's no change to me. Someone has to help me out, basically, if I'm in death saves. If I roll a 20, I spend a healing surge, I go to 0 hit points, and then add my healing surge value. I'm no longer dying on consciousness. If I don't have healing surges, well... Now you die, of course, if you fail 3 death saves, or if your current hit points are reduced to your bloody value as a negative number. So remember that 10 that I said for my bloody value if I had 20 hit points? Negative 10 means I'm dead. It does mean I can consider negatives. But anytime I heal, though, I go to 0. And then heal. Which includes healing the dying. So keep that in mind, too. That is another thing, that if I heal someone that is dying, we have them go to 0 first. We ignore all those negatives, and then add the healing on top. It's just the negatives are representative of things in combat hitting you and possibly killing you. And you do have the option, if you reduce a creature to 0 hit points, to just knock it out and not kill it, and it will be unconscious until it regains hit points. Or, like, if it doesn't receive any healing, it's restored to 1 hit point and become conscious after a short rest. And receiving healing can make you conscious in general, too. Cool. But, I think that's enough, and the kind of main hits we had for combat and for E. Alright, let's chat about this a little bit before we end it. So we've gone over a lot here. And you can see there's some very heavy comparisons to other playing game systems. Certainly speaking, the big thing that I can kind of mention here is the scaling. Something like 5e has the proficiency mod as a scale. Something like Pathfinder 1st Edition has base attack. Pathfinder 2nd Edition is a different scaling, but similar to 4e, as it adds you a level to a lot of things, including defenses and attacks. So level matters a lot more there. This is a little more subtle because it's half level. That would include for monsters. If I'm fighting a level 10 monster, it's getting +5 with defenses, with attacks, beyond its physical abilities, plus any possible miscellaneous effects that it might have to change that. Scaling matters in combat here, and positioning matters. Remember when I said positioning matters? I can push things off of a cliff. If there's nothing blocking the way, I can push a guy into a fire. Take fire damage. I have to push, pull, shift. That can change the positioning of the battlefield heavily. Forced movement is a big part of this. It's important. It's there. The various modifiers, cover, concealment, all those numbers that do make a difference to your attack modifiers. And things like shifting. Attacks of opportunity are a big thing, because moving out of a square a thing threatens provokes. That means things with a reach are much more likely to attack of opportunity unless you use shifting. And there are little details here and there, talking about saving throws, talking about conditions, that just, they're easy, but also a little complex because you have to kind of get a hold of everything. I think that's the thing about this is, 4E's combat isn't really difficult. It's fairly simple. It's numbers that you're going to know because you know your level. Roll of a d20 versus a simple target number of an enemy, just to find out what happens. And everything that's layered on top of it is just the icing on the cake. The simplicity of, I get these 3 actions. Standard, a move, a minor. And yes, you can replace some of them. I'm not saying you can't. I could take that 3 minor I talked about at the beginning. But the sheer fact is that's very simple math. Now there are some things like the interrupting a movement to do your action that exist in 5e that don't exist here. You have to take them separately in this system. Of course, house rule that in, but that would apply to both players and monsters, and I don't know if players want to necessarily give the monsters that ability to shift up and move. But again, moving within threat and range provokes attack of opportunities. And you're much more easier able to get opportunity actions. 1 per creature's turn. Much easier then. Even the dying, health, and all that kind of stuff, it's relatively simple. I explain, healing surges. I explain when you die. Nothing too difficult. You take death saves in 5th edition. You take similar effects in other places. You get negative hit points. 4E is this kind of mid-ground between so many other systems that you can kind of see as it is. And on the surface, it feels very complex because it is a tactical game, and a board matters. But really, when you come down to it, the actual mechanics of the system are fairly straightforward, fairly easy. You check certain things at the beginning of your turn, take your turn, check things at the end of your turn, call it a day. And all the little bells, whistles, icing on the cake, all that other kind of stuff just is the details. And they say the devil's in the details a lot of times. That's here. Anyway, I'll leave it all here for today. If you do have any more questions or discussions, you want to do more on 4E, especially the combat stuff, this might be one of my final 4E videos. I don't know. This is the last main topic I wanted to handle on. If there are things that people want me to talk about and discuss, I can discuss them and dive into them and kind of try to teach you and educate you on there. There is little bits and pieces about, adventuring, rituals, magic items, other stuff that might be in the player's handbook, monster guides, stuff like that I could do, but I don't necessarily know if they're important for me. So just let me know in the comments for me. And, I forgot to start at the beginning the achievement of the algorithm, like, subscribe, ring the bell, all that stuff for you YouTube people out there. You Twitch people can also go do that if you want. It's really nice of you. When this video goes live, probably tomorrow, up on YouTube in a day or two. Alright, everybody. I have social media link below. I do these kind of streams on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays live. You always join them there. I record them. I have a live play of Pathfinder First Edition on Wednesdays at 9 for Crimson Queen, and I have a discussion kind of show / podcast on Saturdays at 6, discussing things. We dive into news of the week and deeper discussion topics. It's been a lot of 5e reviews. Alright, probably shouted out enough. I probably talked about enough. I don't know. I might have forgotten some things. Anyway, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this fairly deep dive into the combat of 4e. It was hard to figure out what I wanted to kind of say, what I didn't want to say, so I kind of said as much as I felt was there, because there is a lot to it, but it's simple too, and I hope you use this to learn, and enjoy. Alright, until the next time, farewell everybody, goodbye.